Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Legends of Sport podcast. I'm your host, Andy Bernstein, and bringing you this podcast deep in the NBA bubble in Orlando. We are in the conference finals around this time and looking forward to a great NBA finals in the bubble. A champion will be crowned in the next few weeks. So that's going to be exciting to be able to cover that. A very unique experience, to say the least, out here in the bubble. I have a great guest today, one of my dearest friends in the business, the great Jack McCallum, Hall of Fame sports writer. You know him from Sports Illustrated. He's written so many books about the NBA and his experiences around the Dream Team. And I had a great chat with Jack today about so many things, catching up. The guy's supposed to be retired, but he doesn't look retired to be, I'll tell you that. And it was just a wonderful conversation about all the memories that we shared going back to the 80s. He and I basically started around the same time. He started with SI in 81. I started shooting NBA basketball that same time. Jack became the beat writer for Sports Illustrated in the mid-'80s. And we were there for that gigantic rise of the NBA and that incredible ride that we had for three and a half decades. So great to catch up with Jack. You know, Jack was very instrumental in helping me get the Kurt Gowdy Award at the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. I'm so grateful to him for our friendship, being a great colleague, some great memories. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast because I really enjoyed catching up with the great Jack McCallum. And as always, I'll see you guys on the backside. So welcome my good friend, Hall of Famer, Jack McCallum, to the Legends of Sport podcast. And I'm down here in the bubble. Jack, where are you, buddy? You look like you're in your study. And,
I am not.
You're not in the bubble.
I am not. I'm in my own bubble, I guess. I'm in my office, which, it's supposed to be as you get older, you're supposed to have more room. But as you start having grandkids, my office is now also a bedroom. You know, there's a bed over there. So
right.
I'm in my office in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, love it.
Sometimes not wishing I was down there, but wondering, I'd like to be in there for 2 hours.
do a little flyby.
Get the hell out of there would be my probably preferred. When this started, Tim Layden, a great writer at SI, sent around this email saying, would you have done this?
Yeah.
You know, now someone in your position kind of, you had to be there.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
If I've given the choice, I think it probably would have been based on age, that I would have certainly done it when I was 45 and under, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, I really don't know. Don't know what I would have done.
Well, the quarantine, the 7-day quarantine is a little daunting. Having gone through it, and it was, I got through it. It was fine, but it's a lot to go through. It's a big sacrifice. You're away from your family a long time. I'm 2 months down here, so as we record this, halfway through, and when we release it, it'll be closer to the end, which is great. But what intrigues you about this, as the writer that you are, and I'm curious, I know that you are, and you just said it, that you would love to be here. What intrigues you the most about this situation?
I think how some people, and I don't have the answer to this, Andy, because I'm not down there, but all the playoffs, I was through and been through many of them with you.
Mm-hmm.
We always talk about who responds to the playoff pressure, and we know the great. This is a whole different kind of thing. And I wonder, I don't know, for example, part of my problem here is I don't know the guys like I used to, and you do, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know Jokic. I don't know Jamal Murray, but it would be interesting to me. There's a different kind of pressure responding to this. And it just looks like some people are more at home.
Yeah.
It just looks like, this is Jimmy Butler's kind of place. This is Jokic's kind of place. And I'm not saying that's why they won and advanced and Kawhi Leonard can't respond to the bubble. But I think there's two kind of pressures going on here. And it really would be a fertile field for a psychologist, as we all try to negotiate our way through this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out here in the real world, and I've known people that are taking it, are doing very well with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people that really aren't. And it's got to be, that's exacerbated when you're put into a kind of really pressure-packed thing when you have to perform every day in front of people. So that's, I think, what's the most interesting to me, and I don't really have an answer to it. Probably it'll turn out the best players will probably emerge. That LeBron has been great, no surprise. But I'm really interested in that Denver team. It's really been fascinating to watch them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I covered that, and my heart is with the Clippers. I have no shyness in saying that. It was very sad for me to see them exit like that. But you got to be happy for a team that just nobody even. I don't think anyone discounted them. Nobody even counted them in or out. It's like they were literally an afterthought to the situation here. And the other thing that, as you were speaking about, the uniqueness of this situation is that your job would be different here. I mean, access to the players is severely limited. A lot of stuff is done, at a big distance. There's no one-on-one situation. You can't pull a guy aside, that kind of thing, which you're famous for. And that's how you establish your relationships. That's how you, literally built your career back in the day when there wasn't, a pandemic, but there weren't so many layers to have to go through. And that I think might be frustrating for somebody like you with so much experience.
Yeah, I'll address that, but I'm interested to ask you how your job is. Is your job any different?
Yeah,
I mean, you built your job was based on relationships.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is a relationship business.
Yes.
That's how I built. That's all I could do would be to try to find out something that somebody else. And there was a moment, you could build a story around one moment. I remember there was a series involving the Spurs, and 3 straight timeouts. I saw Tim Duncan take somebody aside and tell them something during a timeout.
Mm-hmm.
It was Bowen one time with somebody else. Well, you couldn't ask Tim because he'd tell you to go to hell. But I could go to Bowen or Ori, whoever it was, and say, "What did Duncan tell you?"
Yeah.
And you can build a whole story around that.
Yeah.
And so I'm reading some of the stuff like the SI guys down there, but I'll just tap them on the shoulder, Mike Rosenberg and Chris Mannix.
Mm-hmm.
What a great job they're doing without being able to do that. But you're right, it does make a difference. And I wondered for you how it's different.
Yeah, it's different. We're kept at a major social distance from the players. My sort of, the thing I love the most is behind the scenes and being in the locker room, as and even traveling with the guys and all that stuff. And that's so far has not really happened. I think that'll open up a little bit as we get deeper into the playoffs, and then it becomes part of sort of the finals routine, that NBA Entertainment, myself, get some time with whatever teams are in it. But it is different for sure. I had to come to grips with that and kind of play the hand that I'm dealt down here. So, I love the games. I think the quality of play has been great. Like you said, it's a bizarre, I got to be honest with you, situation to be in an empty arena with piped in fan noise and music and virtual fans. It was weird because, I watched all of this on TV for the first, the scrimmage games and the play-in games and then the beginning of the first round. Then you come down here and you walk into the arena for the first time, and I felt like I walked into a video game. It's like, this is really true.
Well, where are you during the games now?
Yeah. So
where are you?
You notice they've taken all the videographers, photographers off the court, right? So the court is completely clean on the baselines. So we're in the corners. Like if you're watching your TV screen left to right, the full court, I'm in the bottom left of your TV screen, like in the shadows. You can't see me at all.
On the floor?
No, not on the floor. I'm like on a chair. Honestly, it's about 2 feet off the floor, elevated, so I can actually see over the advertising board in front of me. But I'm not sitting on the floor. I'm literally in like a chair.
Can you hear the game?
Oh yeah, no, you can hear. You hear a lot of trash talking, which is great. But they keep the crowd noise pretty loud.
Well, that's one thing that interested me, because one of the things, and I played basketball at a a low level in high school and 1 year of college. And
Mhm.
one of the great things about the game was the sounds of the game. And that was
Mhm.
like squeaking sneakers. And the only time you could hear that was when you went to a practice.
Right, right.
You heard
Yeah,
you heard guys talk and you heard that sneaker squeaking noise,
yeah,
with guys moving. And
yeah.
I wondered, with all the negative, I wonder if you could hear that in the game and it sounded some sort of elemental,
Mhm.
aspect to the game that you normally can't hear in a crowded arena.
Yeah. Well, listen, just talking about that harkens me back to the Dream Team. One of the subjects near
Who?
and dear. The Dream Team. You remember those
Yeah,
guys?
I remember.
92, back in the prehistoric era. And talking about practice and that unbelievable practice that you and I were. Well, I don't know if you actually witnessed it because I didn't see it, but you wrote about it for sure. The greatest game nobody ever saw, right? It was the
Yeah,
practice in Monte Carlo.
I
So
did not witness it. We used to come in. I can't remember whether you had any access that I did not have, but one of the things you had to get used to in international play
mhm.
was how they closed down access. Now,
Yeah.
it might have been different for you.
Well, not really. I mean, we got some access with the guys. I wasn't at that practice. That one was everyone was kicked out of that one, as you remember
Right. They
that
were,
particular
yeah.
one.
Although I found out later that somehow Jim Gray was there, by the way.
Really?
Jim informed me that he was sort of Zelig. He's kind of,
It was one of those deals where he probably went to the restroom, came back, everyone was kicked out, and like, oh, okay, I'll just hang out.
yeah. Well, when I started to write the book
Yeah,
about the Dream Team was that, the whole thing in our business, we alluded to it before, is access. And
yeah.
in Barcelona and the whole Olympic experience, you really didn't have that much. You didn't go to practices. That's the
Hmm.
time you didn't go to practices. You couldn't get in the locker room.
Yeah.
You weren't riding the buses. So a lot of this had to be reconstructed. So when I told the story of the Dream Team, I kind of decided to go back and tell kind of the creation story. Go
Mhm.
back to it. Kind of began with the 1984 Olympics, with the Michael, Patrick, Chris Mullen team
Right.
that won the gold,
Hmm.
because access is really limited. So maybe it's a little bit like that in the bubble. Probably it's more so in the bubble, but
Yeah. Yeah.
international ball, you don't get the kind of access you do, that we used to get in the NBA.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, that was definitely an experience and one of the greatest of my career, your career, that Dream Team experience, of course. I mean, you've written so much about it. We were both on the inside for the entire time. Do you have one or two memories? I mean, it's hard to ask this question, I know, because people ask me that, but that stand out like from that experience that you'll always take with you. Like one that I have, for example, is being in the training room and then Michael comes in, Magic comes in, they're just yucking it up like a couple of guys, just hanging out. Also, when I got to shoot David Robinson on the roof of the hotel playing the saxophone, that was unbelievable. Something like that. Is there some offbeat memory you have, Jack, you haven't really shared?
Sure. I mean, I probably shared it somewhere along the line, but when I started writing the book, one of the things that came to me was, we have to look at this a little differently. We look at it as a print journalist, kind of non-sentimentally, and try to get to the issues and look at the cynical part of it. But I remember specifically when they ran out for the first time in Portland together,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it was like,
Yeah.
holy shit, can I say that? This
Yes.
is happening. That
Yeah.
these guys that I've been talking about for 10 years,
Hmm.
you saw this story building. You got on this elevator with David Stern and these other, and it was going up.
Yeah.
And I had taken my kids and my wife to Portland, and they were in the stands. And I remember looking up and thinking, wow, I'm really glad they got to kind of see this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another moment was in Barcelona that David Dupree and I, the great USA Today writer,
Hmm.
we went out to dinner with Karl Malone real early. And you tie into the story somewhat embarrassingly, not for you, but for me. And David, one of the most modest people in the world, says, hey, Karl, you think we could get a picture with us and the Dream Team. This is how big this moment seemed, because Dupree and I would be the last guy to ever climb into a picture. I mean, you
Yeah, of
know me well
course.
enough to
Yeah,
know that.
you usually shy away from any pictures. Yeah.
And Carl says, who never got along quite as well with Magic as everybody else. If there was somebody on the team that maybe there was a gap between in the way they looked at life.
Mm-hmm.
And Carl says, well, we got to clear that kind of stuff with Magic. He's like the ceremonial captain. It was like Michael ran sort of the ship on the court, and then Magic was running the ship off the court.
Right.
So that really stuck with me, how much that's a barometer of how close that team was, because I don't think personally Magic and Carl were too close, but Carl understood on the architecture of this team, this is kind of how it ran.
Yeah.
So the final addendum to that was this somehow gets passed along, this request. And a couple minutes before the final, Brian McIntyre comes over to me and goes, hey, we're going to shoot this picture of you and Dupree now. And you went back and took this picture. These guys are coming out of and half of them don't even know why they're stopping. And I have this picture somewhere on my desk.
Oh, you have to send me that.
Like,
you have to send me a screenshot or a phone picture of that.
I put in the book, I said, and Andy Bernstein took the worst picture of his, professional career.
I love
Dupree and the Dream Team. So I remember there's a lot of memories, but there are two of them.
That's such a great story, Jack. Wow. So, Jack, we're releasing this during the sort of the end of the conference finals. So I wanted to talk to you a lot about legendary conference finals, legendary finals. Now, you've covered a lot of them, and I'm not asking you to, cherry pick, but is it safe to say that the Showtime Celtic era was kind of the golden age of the NBA, that rivalry really is like head and shoulders above any other rivalry that we've seen or maybe we'll ever see?
Oh, there's no question about that. And it's not just a sentimental feeling. I mean, you can put anecdotal reasons down why we never saw anything like that before. I mean, LeBron Curry was good, but the connection with, Golden State and Cleveland or Golden State and Miami, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. So what you had here was that, I always just felt so lucky, because when I got the beat in the early 80s, mid 80s, it was almost sort of like, Jack, let's try Jack on the NBA beat. It wasn't like, well, we see this thing really rising and we need a really great writer. That's not what happened. At S Sports Illustrated, pro basketball was literally like the fifth sport. I mean, college basketball, pro football, college basketball, to a certain times even hockey. And it was kind of like, but when I got there, and I mean, you had this feeling too. What year did you really start shooting?
Well, you got the beat. You came to SI in 81, right?
And but I didn't get the beat for a couple years.
Yeah.
It was more like when Michael came in, 84, 85.
Right. So that 81, 82 season was really my first time working, doing NBA games, and then officially with the NBA in 83 with that All-Star game in 83.
Yeah, was that
the famous Marvin Gaye All-Star. He's one of the few people on the planet who can relate to that being the memory from that All-Star game.
It was a I'll get back to your question in a second, but it was sort of it was a moment. It was almost like this. I'm looking back on it now with probably too much symbolism, but that's what writers do. It was almost like this clarion call. It was almost like this alert that went out that the NBA is here. And how that ties in was that, we're not, all of us that got the beat back then, we're not very smart, but one of the things we could see was that we were starting down here, and you could see this thing rising. You understood even back then that you were on this kind of journey. And you knew it was going to be rough. I mean, Stern comes in '84, although he had been pulling some strings since '78 probably.
Mm-hmm.
And even then he had, Len Bias came along and, all kinds of the drug class of 1986. But still, you could see this sport slowly rising, and you understood that you were going to be fortunate enough to be able to chronicle some of this. So it was kind of a dual-edged thing. You had your great stories and great personalities, but you could also see there was kind of a larger moment
Mm-hmm.
afoot. And it's just pure luck. When people ask me about my career, I said people's careers were made by being there at the assassination of Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Rather's career was made by that. Tom Wicker's career was made by.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason you're still talking to me right now. The only reason is that we came along during that time
Mm-hmm.
of not only the greatest NBA time, but one of the great sort of movements in the history of sport were those years between '84 and then probably the end of Michael's three-peat, but especially
Mm-hmm.
those years up until the Dream Team.
Yeah. It's funny because when we were going through it, and I'm glad you brought that up because honestly, I don't want to say I wasn't conscious that this was like something historic, but I was so hell bent on building my career and, everything going on in the moment that I wasn't really stepping back and really looking at, wow, this is pretty historic, Um, and you had that perspective, and I think it helped you, right? With your work.
It's probably because you're younger. I mean, how you were 13 when you started the NBA. How old were you
I'm a
when you?
little younger than you, but well, in '81, I was 23, so
Yeah. So it was a different thing. I mean, I'm
yeah,
about 12, 13 years older than you. So
yeah,
uh, the difference was, and I was always a basketball fan. It's a sport I play. I played it in high school in the '60s.
hmm
So what I experienced in the '70s toward the NBA was negative.
yeah,
I mean, I liked it,
hmm
but so I was a little more conscious of where the league had been.
hmm
You know what I mean? That
yes,
we
yeah,
understood the problems they had, and
right,
I think one of the, if you can call it fortune, I mean, one of the fortunate things was that Magic and Larry, when they came into the league, and to a certain extent, Michael, all
mm
those guys, they understood where the league had been also.
hmm
And they kind of bought in, particularly Irvin, uh, bought into this idea that it had to be sold.
hmm
And now that's a real difference with the players. And well, they're not like Larry and Magic and all those. I understand that because they're coming into a league that to them appears to be on autopilot. That hey, everything's great. We're all getting $20 million contracts. It's
yeah,
no problems. And I think that really defined that generation. The Larry, Magic, Michael, Dr. J. He kind of gets left out a little
hmm
bit when I end up talking about Michael, Magic, Larry. Like there's some magic melded person together. We forget Dr. J bought into the same thing, who had come from the '70s, had come from the ABA, this great carnival circus, and understood when he got to the NBA, kind of what had to be done to sell this league.
hmm
And so I had seen that perspective of it and could really see the rise, very, very clearly.
yeah. And how did that impact you doing your job? Because our good friend, dear friend Brian McIntyre, Terry Lyons, David Stern. I mean, they all saw the incredible value of you documenting you yourself and Sports Illustrated, um, documenting the rise of the league. Um, is it safe to say that there was a lot of cooperation between the league and the media back then? Not that there isn't now, but I'm saying was that a conscious effort on the part of the league to, build it through the media as best that they could?
Well, you mentioned Brian and Terry,
hmm
Brian McIntyre and Terry Lyons. I mean, the two greatest. The NBA understood, and it's not just. I'll tell you a funny story. Was that Steve Wolf, who was a great baseball writer at Sports Illustrated, he came over to do a couple NBA stories in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to him. He called me up and said, "Hey, you never told me how great this was. I covered baseball, which at that time was still sort of the American pastime." And he said, "It's nothing but a pain in the ass to get people, to
Mm-hmm.
get them to talk, to get the PR guys to help you, to get the league to grant access. I came over to the NBA, they don't even know who I am. And they're saying, hey, good, come on in. Yeah, I'll get you some time with the guy."
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just me from the inside. It was guys like Terry and Brian, Matt Dobeck from the Pistons, Julie Fye, who was first with the Kings and then the Suns.
Mm-hmm.
They understood how to walk this line between protecting the league. Brian and Terry, who remain great friends, never told me anything, that they shouldn't tell me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, helped me do the job.
Mm-hmm.
So now, having said that, David Stern presented a great cooperation/conflict type of guy. I mean, David would argue with anything you wrote. He would challenge you when you brought up the negative stuff, which you had to do. He would say, "McCallum, you're full of shit. This isn't true." So there was always that. He kind of kept you on your toes. But once again, it's another factor of how fortunate I was to have come into this league where there were interesting personalities, interesting things to write about, a league willing to help you to do it. And to this day, 2020, when I have to dip, I've been sort of semi-retired for 10 years, but I'm always coming back to do something, a book, a podcast, a something or other. It's like I never left. It's like I still can call up and say, half the people still think I'm employed by Sports Illustrated and you'll be playing that card too.
Yeah.
When you're 80 years old.
Hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to be playing that
Knock
card.
on wood.
It's
Yeah.
going to be okay.
Hey, Jack, it's so incredible to think about how far we've come, because back in the day, and I love use of that, one of my dad's expressions, back in the day, there was no social media, there was no Twitter going on. People relied on you and the great writers. You mentioned Dave Dupree, Bob Ryan, all the great writers, Jim Murray, whoever, Scott Ostler, all our friends who reported back then. You were the source, like the players weren't putting out stuff on their channels, and the leagues didn't have, all the leagues, not just the NBA, but they didn't have social media and websites and stuff. So, your information was kind of like gospel. People would wait Tuesday morning, get Sports Illustrated and read what the hell's going on, with the Pistons Celtics series, right? Because all you had was TV at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we were lucky. When I went back and started researching the Dream Team book, which came out in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So what I found out, fortunately, was that the record of that time, there were some great daily news. You mentioned Bob Ryan wrote about it. Jan Hubbard was a great reporter for Newsday. So they would write about it every day in a story that was this long. Well, imagine today if Charles Barkley went out on the Ramblas at midnight, how many social media posts would be written about? It would have blown up Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It would have blown everything up.
Yeah.
And you know how many there were back then? Zero.
Right.
There were zero.
Well, it was you and I who went out with him that one night. You probably went more than once, and it became a story in SI, the Mad Bull of the Ramblas, right?
The difference in the job was that people asked me about what was it like to cover the Dream Team. I said those weeks in Barcelona, the fact that they paid me is a crime.
Right.
Here's what I wrote. There was no off-day stories. There was no SI.com. So I wrote 4 stories. The first one was a long captions to the pictures you had taken
right, exactly.
in Monte Carlo.
Yes, I
Number
remember.
1.
Right.
Number 2 was a Q&A with Magic because we were still talking about the HIV thing. Number 3 was a following Charles around the run list. And number 4 was a follow-up I wrote when I got back home about the season start. It
What a boondoggle.
Oh, it was a total boondoggle.
That's
It was
hilarious.
a total boondoggle because the other thing was there was nothing to write about the games. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like you had to sit there and going, holy crap, there's Detlef Schrempf coming off a screen to make the score 49-18.
Right.
So they should take back that salary, but they can't do it right now.
Yeah, I always said the greatest assignment I ever had was being with those guys for 7 weeks. Not that they shouldn't have paid, because they did, but that.
Well, you at least worked. I mean, you had.
I was working. Yeah.
I remember getting these pictures. Do you remember that? That was my first week story.
Yes.
They told me, we don't want you to write anything. Just take these pictures that Bernstein took and write some captions about. I'm going, that's all you want me to do? I'm a great writer.
I got that great Jack McCallum writing captions with my phone.
What am I, an intern? That was my first week. That was my first week story. And you know what?
I love it.
It was justified because that's what people wanted to see.
Yeah.
There was nothing to analyze about the games. There was nothing that's probably, in retrospect, was the best story to do. And the second one was magic. The incredible 9 months he had between thinking he was going to die and then getting to a position where on the largest platform in the world, nobody was even asking him about it. And then Charles defining what that Olympic ethos was. That was the stories that had to be done, and they were easily done, frankly.
You mean when Charles elbowed the guy from Angola? That Olympic ethos?
Well, that's true. Talk about overcoming something,
right.
And later on, when I did the Dream Team book, this is 2010, Charles is still claiming that Hector Coimbra elbowed him 2 or 3 times. And I remember relating that to Jordan, and Jordan goes, Charles, he's an effing idiot.
I love it.
Nothing happened.
That is so hilarious. I'm just wondering, like, if the guys had, and you brought this up, if the guys had cell phones and they had Instagram accounts, what that whole experience, it would have been completely different. I mean, it would have been kind of like this bubble life kind of, you're seeing the guys put out their own stuff and telling the narrative from their own perspective, which we didn't have back then, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, today I saw very quickly, Dragic went up to Jimmy Butler's room to get coffee.
$20 a cup.
Yeah, it was a $20 cup of coffee, and it was closed. And he had a really funny, nice little 25 seconds about it. It was very humorous. So how many of those things would you have seen, and how many would you have not been able to see?
Yeah, right.
due to content,
Right.
content blocked.
Oh my goodness. Well, I also wanted to talk to you about the time you spent with the Suns in 2005. You were, quote unquote, an assistant coach, right?
That is quote unquote. Yeah.
And you wrote this incredible thing about the 7 seconds or less, the book. Mike D'Antoni opened up his locker room and his coaching staff to you, and you literally were an assistant coach and saw everything from the inside. I mean, what a great experience that must have been. I mean, Mike was just on the podcast recently. He's a good friend, of course. Steve Nash, who was on that team and now is going to be the coach of the Nets. You talk about that experience and what that was like for you.
There was anything I've ever done, there would be nothing like that. And what I learned about basketball, and 2 things about that, Andy. We talked before about relationships and how this is a relationship business. I had this idea to get behind the scenes of the team for a week in training camp. I called up Julie Fye, who I had known for years, and Julie just says, hold on, I'll ask Mike. And within 15 minutes, she said, yeah, come on out and do it. Kind of based on, not that we were that close, but Julie had grown up with the league and sort of understood this idea. If you write something about a team that, okay, there's going to be 2 or 3% of it that they're not going to like, but there's going to be 95% of it that is going to be positive. And the former public relations people, the old guys, kind of understood that.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't take the 5% that might be a little bit, something they would rather not have in
Mm-hmm.
and make that the whole story.
Yeah.
So that's number one. It was kind of an easy get based upon the fact that I had built up these relationships in the league. Number two, I remember this distinctly. I went to the first practice session when the coaches were just running through stuff. It was Mike, Mark Ivoroni, Alvin Gentry, as you know, one of the great guys in the history of sports,
Yes.
Phil Weber, and Mike's brother, Dan D'Antoni, who, like myself, was a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
They talked about stuff. They were just breaking down offense for like 20 minutes. And they talked about stuff about basketball and looked at it in a way that I never had. And I had grown up with the game, played the game, but this breakdown of the way they thought about the game. Oh, that was like what we did against Miami 2 years ago. Oh, wait, this is the way Sacramento runs its curls,
Yeah.
And I was going, there's a lot about this game, that I really don't know. And I would never have another experience like 7 seconds or less. And I'm pretty safe to say that it's going to be hard for any kind of journalist to get that kind of access again.
Yeah, well, that was such a special group, and Mike, of course, being how generous he was with opening it up to you. Did you was there anything surprising except for that story you just told? But anything surprising about any of those characters? Like Nash or Maury Stoudemire, or any of those guys that you didn't know. Leadership wise
I
or
mean,
whatever.
there was a lot of stuff. I mean, Steve, that was one of Steve's MVP years. That was his second MVP year. And one of the things surprised me when he became a coach was that Steve, and I'm sure by this time you know Steve very well also, Steve doesn't love that stuff that goes along, every day. I'm the CEO and I got to address the troops every day. Steve, at least the year I was hanging out, he's very popular because he's very smart and cooperative and all, but Steve doesn't love that stuff. I mean, Steve was a very, very, very quiet type of leader. And I'm anxious to see how he makes that transition. Sean Marion was a very difficult guy kind of to get to know, and Sean was the one person that didn't love the book when it came out. And Sean's, I guess, kind of sensitivity, even when you get to that level and you play at a high level, like Sean was an all-star player back then, the little slights that these guys feel, when people like, oh, my 3-point. I remember Sean, I would talk about his 3-point shot, his style. He used to come down, remember, and kind of pop it and shoot it real high.
Yeah.
And we had an argument one day. I said, Sean, I'm not making fun of it. I'm saying it's distinctive. It's
different.
Yeah, sure. I don't shoot like Larry Bird. Sure, I'm not perfect with. And so just the little slights maybe that players had, the sensitivities and the things that you have to be attuned to when you're a coach. Like Mike knew he had to have a relationship with Nash. But so much of the other relationship stuff he would delegate to Alvin. Oh, Alvin's better to go talk to Amare. Alvin's better to go calm down. Phil Weber's better or Dan's better to go deal with Leandro Barbosa. Phil Weber's better to go deal with this. So there was these little constant things that came up that you have to deal with as a team, so they do not grow and and start to overwhelm everything. I would say the day-to-day of staying on top of interpersonal relationships was something that really surprised me, that even if you have a $12 million contract, it doesn't mean you're not a human being who's vulnerable to all these kind of little things that affect us, all of us as regular people.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Phil Jackson. I was just become a young father, and was having dinner with Phil somewhere on the road. And I said, I asked him, I said, Phil, what is like the difference or similarities between coaching a pro basketball team and parenting. And he looks at me and goes, "It's the same damn thing, Eddie. They just have a lot more money."
That's definitely true. And you got to get over stuff. I mean, Mike, as you know, D'Antoni, we talked about, very pleasant guy, but Mike has a real temper.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike is a very, very, very competitive guy. I think that's
Mhm.
the most surprising thing about him.
Mhm.
And the most competitive player on that team probably was Raja Bell.
Mm.
And one day after the game, Mike and Raja had it out, man. I mean, they were really, really pissed off. If you had that kind of argument with your wife or one of your kids, you better take care of it, right away.
Yeah.
And I still remember walking out with D'Antoni that night and him going, I got to take care of this tomorrow.
Mhm.
I got to get on this tomorrow. And sure enough, that's the first thing at practice. I came in and there's Mike and Raja, kind of talking about it. And
Yeah.
mature people realize, and successful teams, that you got to get by, you got to get by this stuff.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to me watching, a team really, this living organism from inside. And I'm so fortunate. I'll never be able to, fully thank the Suns for really letting me in, because I think that's an experience very few people had ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jack, the last thing I want to talk about are any memories that you have or any stories you can share about the late, great Kobe Bryant, near and dear to both of our hearts. And I like to ask all my guests who knew him if, something, it could be anything, but anything that just sticks out, any interaction you might have had with him or something.
Well, Kobe was real. If I would use an adjective to describe Kobe, I know there's some unpleasant one people would use, competitive to the,
Mhm.
ruthless,
Yeah.
Kobe to me was really smart. He was a smart guy, and I
Mhm.
really respected people. I could always see his mind working. And this is just one little thing that I remember. It was at the 2012 Olympics. I was there in London,
Mhm.
and Kobe had just made this comment about, well, what do you think your team would do against the Dream Team?
Mm.
And Kobe, quite honestly, had said something like, well, I don't know. I think we could beat them. I think we could play with them. And I went up to him, and he got tons of crap for this.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I went up to him and I said, what did they expect you to say?
Yeah.
You're Kobe Bryant. You're the most competitive, egotistical person on earth. Do you think you're going to say, I'm not sure we could beat those guys?
Yeah, we would just
Kobe
lay
just
down.
goes,
They're the Dream Team. Yeah.
yeah. They asked me, and I just said, hey, I'm Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to say? Of course that's
Yeah.
what he's going to say.
Yeah.
And I wrote this thing for the program of the NBA Hall of Fame program, which probably, I'm not sure what's going to happen with it. And, it's interesting that one of the things Kobe did, unlike probably anybody in history, was if you want to, and as a photographer, you can choose this, what's the iconic Kobe image? And what he had succeeded in doing in the final years of his life was converting this ruthless competitor who would, I don't know, the rise up jump shot, the whatever it would be. The iconic picture of Kobe now is him and his daughter.
Mm. It's really
of,
true.
of,
Yeah.
of Kobe had somehow transformed himself,
Yeah.
which, God knows Michael never did.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying you have to do it.
Mhm.
Magic really, probably never did it. Larry probably never did it. It's Kobe and his daughter.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's a really interesting thing to me, and it's not just because it was the last vision we saw of him. It has something to do with, Gigi, of course, perishing with him.
Mhm.
But that is what Kobe had succeeded in doing. And I think that's one of the things about him, with all the heroics on the court, that I will really remember about him.
Yeah, that's a beautiful statement, Jack. Really is. I mean, he took his relentless pursuit of greatness off the court and brought it into being a father, promoting the women's game, all that stuff. And it was
there's
sort of a seamless transition for him too.
When my wife and I take a walk in the neighborhood, and like all senior citizens, we've taken 50,000 walks since the goddamn pandemic has come. There's a young girl up the street who is out there with her father. Looks like a real player, kind of doing drills. And as I went by, I said, Kobe's got some stuff on YouTube working with his daughter. And him and his daughter turned to me and went, "We're listening to him."
We know.
So that's an interesting legacy to kind of have.
Yes, absolutely.
Because Kobe was, a genius playing like all those guys, but he had a kind of fundamental, his footwork was as good as anything, anybody you could ever see.
Yeah.
So he's in a way, still going to be able to teach people, from where he is now, and that's quite a gift.
Yeah, very well said, Jack. Thank you. So, Jack, last thing, promise. What are you doing now? You're supposed to be retired, but you were doing a podcast. I don't know if you're still doing your Dream Team podcast, if that's still going on.
Well, it's still available. It's still Googleable.
No, it's great. I listened to it. It's terrific.
It did very well. I had happened to save these. If you looked around my office, you'd understand how's this guy save anything. But I had somehow saved these tapes.
Yeah.
Because I knew they would be important. Or I didn't know how. And then when someone approached me about a podcast, I go, that's funny. I have all the voices of Michael, Magic, Larry, David, Patrick. I got them all. Yeah. So I kind of built the podcast around them. I'm kind of working on a couple things, balls in the air. I'm trying not to always go back to the same well. Somebody emailed me when the Dream Team tapes came out and went, you really keep that.
You're milking
really
it,
getting all your money out of that dream.
Hey, why not?
Out of that Dream Team era.
How many Dream Teams come along in somebody's life and career?
And I told him the story of talking to Sylvester Stallone about this movie. I was doing a story on sports movies, and Stallone agreed to talk to me because he had another sports movie coming out. I think he did a race car movie. I can't even remember what it was. Yeah. We got about 15 minutes into conversation, and I went, "You mind if I ask you about Rocky?" And he says, "I don't care at all. I'll talk. You think anybody would know my name if it wasn't for Rocky?" So that's kind of how I feel about the Dream Team. I'd like to do some other stuff. I want to do some other stuff, and I've done some other stuff, but it keeps kind of coming back to this well a little bit. So,
well, you know what? I'm glad to be in that well with you, because we have some great memories. Our friendship really kind of took off at that point, although, I've been around you quite a bit during the 80s and all that, but to be, entrenched with that team, and we all have that memory, that fraternity. It's what, and when the guys all got inducted, enshrined in the Hall of Fame, the Dream Team itself, I felt like they should have put us in that group picture too. It was just a small family of us who were together.
It is. When I went back to do the book, I had to get in touch with them and all. The hardest thing about that is trying to round. It's herding cats.
Sure, absolutely.
And, what I sensed was, like you said, it was a fraternity. The most strong part of the fraternity is the guys themselves. But I think they understood at some level these people, these subsidiary people like myself, who had come along with the whole thing, that it's this whole era type of group. And I think I was kind of included in that, in a small way. And that's why they talked to me. That's why they entrusted, some of their memories to me. As the years go on. Those relationships tend to be a little more diffuse. I don't see them the same way that you do. But I think there'll always be this kind of little bit of a bond based on being there at the beginning. And as I said, riding the elevator upward.
Well, glad to have been on that elevator with you, my friend. And so great to connect today. Thanks a million for making the time for me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. And it was a lot of fun. You're a good host.
Thank you. We go back so far. We've shared so many memories and events and crazy times, stuff that will always, be with us. It's a beautiful thing,
We'll
really.
always have Madrid. That's
Well,
the first place I remember
that's the
having
next
cocktails
podcast.
with you.
Yeah. What did Larry Bird say in Madrid about the castle or something?
One thing he told me was that I was asking what the schedule was, and I just remember this. He goes, "Well, I think at night we got the king thing."
Yeah, we did the king thing. We went up to the palace,
Went up
and
to the
he
palace.
said, "Man, this place is old." He
Yeah,
said
that's what he
crazy
said.
quote.
This place is old. And there was a Spanish quote that I ended the story with, that after the game, I still remember Bird going up to meet the king. And it was some Spanish quote that was, "El Rey does not come down to the court.
Right.
Larry Bird goes up to the Rey." My
Yeah.
son would speak. He's a Spanish translator. He should be here. But I think I ended that McDonald's open story with that quote about Bird had to go see the king. The king does not come down.
That is amazing. Well, that's a great way to end this interview, this walk down memory lane with you, my friend. Thanks a million, Jack, and
All right.
continue to stay well, buddy. You're a trooper. I know you had some challenges recently, and you look great, by the way. And just God bless you, man. I hope things continue to go well, and I hope I get to see you. I guess the next time might be at Hall of Fame, and whenever that is. When the hell is that going to be? In March, April, May? I don't know.
I hope so. Nice talking to you, Andy.
You too, Jack. Thanks a million. And you know what? I need to get that picture from you. The one you and Dupree with the team. I'm definitely going to put that out there when we release this thing.
I will find it. It's around. It's around here somewhere with the pictures of the grandkids. I have a picture of myself, and I don't know whether you took this or not. One of the pictures I have on the wall is David Stern and I in Red Square in Moscow.
Yeah, that wasn't me. I think Nat Butler took that one.
I think Nat did take that picture.
He was.
And it's one of I don't have Nat's stuff up.
Yeah.
I have a picture of me and of Charles Barkley and I, and I have a picture of David Stern and I, and I really treasure that picture now that the old grouchy guy who used to scream at me a lot is gone, and really realize what he did. What he did for the league was amazing.
Yeah, me too. I'll always be thankful to David. Well, when you call McIntyre back, tell him I say hi.
I'll do that.
Take care, Jack. Thanks a million, bud.
Okay, Andy. Bye-bye.
Okay, pal. Well, I told you guys that was going to be a fun interview and a great chat with my buddy Jack McCallum. So incredible to catch up with him. Like I said earlier, the guy is supposed to be retired, but he's still got his fingers at everything NBA. So great to catch up with him and relive some great memories. Dream Team, the Bird Magic Lakers, Michael Jordan era. Of course, the great Kobe Bryant. He had some wonderful stories about Kobe. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, because I really did. Guys, you should really check out Jack's podcast called The Dream Tapes. All the tapes that he had with the great Dream Teamers, and he's made a tremendous podcast out of that, a series. His books, one of them called The Greatest Game Nobody Ever Saw, which we talked about, from the Dream Team practice, that legendary practice in Monte Carlo, 7 seconds or less, about being embedded with the 2005 Phoenix Suns and Mike D'Antoni's great team, and Steve Nash and all those guys. So many other things I could tell you about, but you should really check out Jack's work. And of course, his monumental library and archive of work with Sports Illustrated speaks for itself. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Like I said, I'm here in the bubble. I'm going to keep bringing podcasts to you in our Restarting the Clock series through the end of the finals. And of course, you can keep finding us on the LA Times app and online, as well as Apple and Spotify and all your favorite podcast platforms. Keep following us on Instagram at Legends of Sport, our Twitter at Legends_of Sport. Our blog is legendsofsport.blog, and our YouTube and TikTok channels are Legends of Sport. My photography can be found on Instagram and Twitter at ADB Photo Inc. And like I said, I'm continuing to put photos up from my coverage of the NBA bubble. So keep checking out my Instagram and our Legends of Sport platforms, because you'll see very timely stuff going up there every single day. So everybody, keep coming back. We have some great guests for you as we finish up this Restarting the Clock block for you. And following the block, we're going to go back to bringing you great guests from the world of sports, not just the NBA. So appreciate the support, the fact that everybody keeps downloading and telling your friends. We need all the support we can get. So thank you, everybody. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and I'm going to say it, wear your mask. Take care, everybody.